Hi everyone, this is Chris again. You can see my contact information on the screen here. It's Crispy Today on LinkedIn, GitHub, and you can follow my blog at crispycode.ninja. I'm a client solution manager at Magenic. So in that role, I act as the principal solution architect for pre-sale engagements throughout the Bay Area, and also work with our customers to build up their initial backlogs, understand their digital products, and help with that roadmap and project planning. Recently, I've had several clients who've been interested in VSTS, doing migrations from maybe an on-prem TFS to VSTS, and also getting up to speed with Git. So I wanted to do a quick video that goes a high-level overview of setting up projects in VSTS and working with them through Visual Studio. So that's what we'll be doing here. Okay, so here I've logged into my Visual Studio Online account. So I've got my Visual Studio Team Services ready. You can see I have an existing project here, but I'm going to create a new project for this demo. So I'm going to leave it at the defaults with using Git for my version control and the Agile process. So I will scroll down and just click Create. So now that that has been created, I get the VSTS homepage with the getting started information for cloning it into Visual Studio. So I can go ahead and do that now. And then Visual Studio will ask me to authenticate, supply a password, and then sign in. I can choose the local path for where I want this repository to be located and click Clone. And now that it's cloned, we can see I have this folder that's been brought over. Of course, there's nothing in it yet because I haven't set anything up. So I'm going to go back over to my browser and I'm going to set up some work items. So by default, you can see that it's created features and stories. If I wanted to, I could go into the settings, go into backlogs, and enable epics as well. Not important for this demo, so I'll just leave it as is. I will go up to features and I'll just create a new feature. If I wanted, I could then click in and add a user story under this feature. And I could further drill down and add a task or a bug. So that shows a real basic way how you can get started filling out your backlog. Now for any of these work items, I could drill into it and set which iteration I wanted it to be in. Now that I have a few items set up for my work items, let me switch over to the code area and let me go ahead and initialize my repository. So I'm going to leave the check mark to add a README, and I'm going to add a gitignore file for Visual Studio. And I'll say initialize. I can jump over to files and see that I now have that gitignore and a README that's been created. Now typically as we're doing work, we want to create different branches to work on our different features or user stories. So let me show you how you create a branch. So I just clicked the new branch button, and typically have a develop branch. So this will be forked off of the master, and I can start to specify what work items I want associated with this branch. So I'll choose my story. You can choose multiple work items if you like, and create that branch. Switching back over to Visual Studio, in the Team Explorer window, we go into Sync and Fetch. And now if I switch over to branches, I can see that I have the develop and master available. Let me go ahead and make a new local branch based off that develop branch that I just created. So now I have a local develop branch that is going to track with that remote develop branch that I have up in VSTS. Now I can start adding my code. If I go back to the home on my Team Explorer, I can see that there's no solutions yet in here. So this is an easy place for me to go ahead and click New and add a solution. Now for the demo, I can add any solution that I want. I'll just choose a web application. This is fine. And we'll say OK. So then it's going to ask what type of web solution. I'll leave it at MVC. I'm not going to bother with any authentication. So I'll just say OK. And it'll spin up that project. Now that that's been created, if I open Solution Explorer, you should see a fairly familiar looking web application. We can spin this up just to see that it's the normal default application. Okay, so here we see that default ASP.NET site template. So we can close that down, stop debugging, and now I want to push this up to my VSTS. So I'll go back into Team Explorer, click on Changes. And since this is the first time that I've gone in here, it's asking for my identity. So it'll automatically have my name and probably the email address that I want to use based off my VSTS authentication that Visual Studio's already gotten. So I can save that for the repository, and you can go through and see all your changes. I'll click this to stage all those changes and add a commit message and commit those. You see you can add additional work items by ID as you do the commit, and you get this handy message telling you that the commit was done locally, but you'll need to sync if you want to push those up to your VSTS repository. So let's go ahead and do that just so we can see the process. So you'll see I'm on the develop branch. I just want to push that up. And successfully pushed. So if we go back over to the code area in the files and switch from our master branch to the develop branch, we'll see that we now have a solution in here. And we can click through to see all the files. Now, typically the next step might be to do a pull request if I want to get this over to my master branch. So you can initiate pull request a couple different ways. If I switch back over here into Visual Studio, you'll see I have this pull request item here where I can do that. Or back in VSTS, you see I can create the pull request here. Either one ends up with the same process, but let's go ahead and do it here. So we're going to be going from develop into master, and you can give a title and a description. I'll just leave the defaults. Again, you can add additional work items if you like, set up your reviewers, and then once you're happy, click create to generate that pull request. Now this is a little silly in a project where I'm the only person on it, since I would just be reviewing my own pull request, but you can get the idea for what this would look like in a larger real team scenario. So now I have the pull request. I could view any of my active pull requests and review them. So you see I have a couple options here. I can see the updates, the commits. Files are probably the most important thing you want to take a look at and see what exactly changed. So you can see all the items that are in this pull request and go through and review them. You have a couple options. You can approve with suggestions, wait, or reject. And then you can either complete or abandon the pull request. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and approve it, say complete. And it will. You have the option to complete any linked work items after they do the merge. If you didn't want to hold on to the branch that you're merging from, you can delete it, and you can squash the changes if you want everything to go together. In this case, that wouldn't do anything since I only had one. I'll complete the merge. Now if I jump back over to files, develop looks the same. Go back into master. Now you can see I have that same solution in master. So that gives you a high-level overview of how you can manage the process. Typically, you'd probably have a more sophisticated branching strategy than just going straight from develop to master. If you're using something like GetFlow, you would have your develop branch, you'd create features for your different work items that you're focusing on, merge those back into develop, then create a release branch that you might actually do a pull request to that release. Once the release is ready, reviewed, staged, you push that into production, merge to master, and merge back into your develop branch. And it's typically within that release branch where you'd update your version numbers and do any sort of final housekeeping that you need for rolling the items into production. So all your metadata. But the process is still the same. The items that you saw here as far as creating the pull request, how you interact between Visual Studio and VSTS Online, all the same. So that is pretty much the workflow. One other item that can be a little tricky in VSTS is, in this case, I don't need this project any longer. So how can I delete it? If I go to account settings, this can be a little tricky to find, but within account settings, this is the area where you can actually delete your project, and it'll ask you to confirm the name. So that shows us the complete workflow from creating a project, building out a backlog, linking that backlog to different branches, committing changes locally, pushing them up to your remote repository, and creating a pull request to finally bring those code changes into your master branch for your production releases, and getting rid of a project if you need to do that. So thank you very much for watching. Hope this was helpful.